All right. I should be live, and if I am, please let me know in the chat. And thanks for being here on another Monday night where we can discuss some things that are happening lately that are relevant to preparedness and give us some ideas about what to expect in the future as well as what we're preparing for. So, as always, I want to thank Midway USA for supporting the channel and allowing me to do live streams like this one, and that way I can give you information as well as a great place to find preparedness-related gear. So big thanks to Midway USA. We've got 5x5s coming in from Gregor Zamina, Shadow Prepper. Hello, Dave Sickles. Good to see you. We have Cold Reality here as well, and Florida Sheepdog 1 with the 5 out of 5. So looks like things are going well. Savage Lee says 420. I think we know exactly what they mean. Now, El Dragon, 6x6. Wow, now we're really looking good and sounding good. I think we got something working in our favor here. There has been some interesting events recently, and I wanted to give updates on them, as well as make you aware of another supposed event that occurred during the same time period, but may have a little bit of a different twist on it now, and to give you some ideas about what to expect moving forward here in this heightened threat environment, which is actually what the federal law enforcement agencies are applying to Washington, D.C. right now, based on the fact that we have a very large and let's just say anticipatory date coming up called January 20th, also known as Inauguration Day. So, Loretta Hutch, good to see you. That guy Scott, 5x69. Excellent. So, let's get going tonight and talk about how we, need to pay probably the most attention to what happened in New Orleans, okay? Because honestly, the Las Vegas situation is also very interesting, which we will discuss tonight as well. And there is some other things happening too that we're going to talk about. But the New Orleans attack is something that is more relevant to your personal preparedness. This is an attack that targeted innocent people. This is an attack that came out of radicalization, right? And an attack that was actually, in some ways warned about and probably known about beforehand. So, David Baise, good to see you. Always enjoy saying your name. Let's talk about this first, okay? So, what to know about the meta glasses the New Orleans attacker used to scout the French Quarter. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to the French Quarter, but I find it to be a pretty cool place. I actually visited New Orleans a couple times throughout my younger life when I lived in Florida still, so it was much closer. And it's a very nice place, so it's very unfortunate that this all happened here. But here's what we know now about the fact that the attacker was using meta glasses to actually surveil and stake out the area prior to the attack. And I want to just talk about some things regarding these meta glasses really quickly for your personal information so you can be aware of it as well, okay? And this is from today, by the way. The man who drove a truck into a crowd of people in New Orleans on New Year's Day, killing 14, had previously scouted the French Quarter and recorded video with his Meta smart glasses, the FBI said. On October 31st, Shamsa Dinjabar recorded video with the glasses as he cycled through the French Quarter and plotted the attack on a bicycle, okay? FBI Special Agent in charge of the New Orleans field office, Lionel Mithril said, or Mirthel, sorry, they're not as good as Mithril apparently. Jabbar also wore the glasses, which are capable of live streaming during the attack, but did not activate them, which I do find to be interesting because I'm not exactly sure what the purpose of wearing such glasses would be during the attack, unless possibly they were prescription. But what I will say is that you would assume, based on this person's radicalization and association, that they would have live streamed or at the minimum recorded the attack, and we're being told by the FBI that that's not exactly what happened. He did not activate them, it says. Who knows if they actually may have that video recording and obviously are just not going to release it to the public, but that is something that we should be aware of. These people are looking for the validation on the other side from those who they're supporting, right? And video evidence is basically the best validation as well as the best form of motivation for others who want to be radicalized. So keep that in mind, okay? Now, here's what the glasses are capable of. And of course, Meta, yes, is the parent company of Facebook. Meta glasses, made in partnership with Ray-Ban, are frames with a built-in camera, speakers, and artificial intelligence that can be controlled with your voice, buttons, and some simple gestures. Some functions, such as listening to music or interacting with Meta's AI assistant, require the device to be either paired with a phone or able to access the internet. The wearable does not have a display built into the lens, unlike some past industry attempts at building augmented reality smart glasses. However, Meta has said it is working on a pair of glasses that will give users a fully holographic experience. What the glasses can do: one of the main selling points of the glasses is their ability to capture images and video using the onboard camera. Then upload those files to Instagram or Facebook. You can also live stream, but only to Meta's compatible social platforms. You can also use the glasses to make audio and video calls, messaging people, or listen to music. The camera also allows Meta's AI assistant to see what you're seeing, allowing it to translate text into multiple languages, spoken back to you or shown on a paired phone app, and answer simple questions such as searching the nearest landmark to your location. The glasses are largely a hands-free experience, so you will be talking to your device and it will reply. What the glasses can't do: the glasses currently cannot perform complex tasks that other digital assistants might be able to, like booking you a reservation at a restaurant or giving you turn-by-turn directions while you're on the move. And there's no display in the lens, so there isn't a viewfinder for framing photos or video. There are also visual indicators built into the system that allow bystanders to know when you're recording or taking photos. This LED privacy indicator stays on while you use the camera functions. According to Meta, you can't disable this light to be more discreet in your actions. So here's the thing. I already found multiple YouTube videos of people demonstrating how to cover or get rid of that LED light so that you can indeed record privately without other people knowing. So of course, they're always going to find a way to work around those types of privacy measures, but be aware that people are out and about right now wearing devices like these Meta glasses, possibly with malicious intent, and they're recording, and you may be recorded by them, you may be being surveilled by them. It's a lot of technology in the hands of just about anybody right now that can be used against you. So just be aware of that. Maybe do some research, figure out exactly what these glasses look like. So if you ever encounter somebody wearing them, it might give you second thought about what you say or what you do in their presence, right? So that is something to consider. But this person was using it, at least for what we currently know, to surveil the area of attack prior to the attack. Prepper Book Club, good to see you. Glad you're here. Let's see here. Harbor Prepper, good to see you too. I appreciate it. Now, let's also talk about how possibly we saw less damage because of a mistake made by the attacker in New Orleans, but at the same time, maybe it was just a stroke of luck in the sense that they weren't able to actually activate these devices before they were taken out by police. And what I'm talking about here are the IEDs that were planted around the French Quarter, okay? Truck ramming suspect used wrong device and failed detonation of IEDs, say the officials. Now, this is from January 5th, yesterday. And of course, I do want to mention really quickly that yes, today was the certification of the 2024 election in Congress. And yes, Donald J. Trump was certified in the sense of winning the election. And we also had Prime Minister Justin Trudeau resign in Canada. So it was a very interesting day politically, but neither one of those events have a direct impact on my preparedness at this moment in time. What I will say is that I am glad to see that the certification of the election went through smoothly. So now we need to pay attention to January 20th, where there is a lot more of a possibility of something happening than what we just witnessed here on the 6th. And the law enforcement agencies in charge of security for that event think so as well, which we'll talk about later on. And of course, if you're here for Replay Crew, you guys are amazing. I appreciate you checking back in because I know it's kind of late for some of you. So thank you so much. Make sure you comment down below so I can keep that motivation of always coming back here and doing this for you. And if you're new here, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe because it does help you get these notifications when we do these live chats. Now, the suspect in the deadly New Year's Day truck ramming attack in New Orleans made 2 previous trips to the city in October and November. That is when they were using the Meta glasses to actually scout the area, okay? The suspect, Shamsa Dinjabar, an Army veteran and Houston realtor, was also wearing Meta glasses when he allegedly executed the attack, but did not record the attack or attempt to live stream it. That's what we're told. Like I said, maybe they did record it. We won't find that out. We're likely never going to get that information unless it was uploaded to something that the FBI can't stop from other people getting access to. I'm not sure, but just be aware of that. I find it odd that these glasses would be worn to scout and surveil the area, but then not be used in the attack, even though they were being worn at the time. Okay, now here is what we need to know about this in all honesty. Here's a couple things first. He was in town for at least 2 days. During that time, Jabbar, using Meta glasses, recorded a video as he rode through the French Quarter on a bicycle. Mirthill said, as we continue to learn more about that trip, we ask anyone who may have seen or interacted with him to contact us. Mirthill said Jabbar made another trip to New Orleans on November 10th, but we are still piecing together details of that trip. So he was there on Halloween, October 31st, and on November 10th, and most likely surveilling the area, getting prepared for the attack, which happened on New Year's Day. So we have travel happening twice to the attack area. That gives you something to consider moving forward when it comes to suspicious activity, right? But we're going to talk about this person's particular traveling because there's more to the story than just these 2 visits to New Orleans prior to the attack, which we're going to get into here in just a minute. Now, here's where things got really interesting, okay? So, Mirthill said the FBI reviewed a video showing Jabbar planting 2 improvised explosive devices on the streets of the French Quarter before the attack, concealing the devices in coolers. Mirthill said one of the coolers was unwittingly moved from where it was planted on Bourbon and St. Peter streets to another location in the French Quarter, about a block away by an individual who had nothing to do with the rampage. So, keep in mind, originally when the story broke, we were told that there were 4 suspected accomplices, 3 men and a woman, who were involved with planting the IEDs. Is it possible that this is that exact scenario? Some party goer, someone who was probably intoxicated, found a cooler on the side of the road and said, what's this doing here? Picked it up and they went somewhere else with it and then sat it down and then realized like maybe they didn't want it and walked away. I don't know, but like that is something that could check out based on the current environment they were in at the time of the attack. But regardless, this is just something to remember that there were IEDs planted throughout New Orleans and the French Quarter at that time, okay? Jackson said the preliminary field tests indicated the IEDs contained what he described as R-salt explosives, saying the material is similar to RDX explosives and easily obtained in the United States. Jackson said investigators do not believe Jabbar obtained the R-salt explosives from overseas, which some media outlets have reported. Now, here's something I want you to keep in mind while we talk about the New Orleans attack in comparison to like the Las Vegas event, right? This attack, first off, did the most damage and hurt the most people. Second off, it also has the most relevance to personal preparedness because it was an attack on innocent American civilians by somebody who associated with a terrorist organization. But the other thing to keep in mind is that this is the attack that actually has the greater likelihood of having some level of cover-up going on because of the fact that it was likely that this person was on someone's radar and there were warnings given out before the attack ever occurred about this exact style of attack to police agencies throughout the country. So when you think about that and when you're considering the fact that this attack has major implications, and we're talking about, oh, no, there was no accomplices, these suspects, no, somebody else moved the cooler, but like on accident. Oh, and by the way, the explosives that everyone originally reported were from overseas and were hard to obtain are actually easy to get, and it's just something that's like just around everywhere you go. Every time I start seeing these contradictions, especially like the FBI immediately coming out after the attack and saying, oh, no, it's not a terror attack, and then the guy had an ISIS flag flying off the back of his truck. All those things start to tell me that there might be more to this story. And that what we witnessed occurring in Las Vegas and then all the hubbub around that and everything else that, well, in all honesty, didn't hurt as many people and didn't produce as much damage, may be being leveraged to take attention away from the fact that this likely has some more going on to it than what we're being told, right? So you need to keep those things in mind because there's so much contradiction coming directly from the FBI regarding this case that I have concerns, let's just say, okay? Now, okay, the IEDs left in the 2 coolers failed to go off, either because Jabbar was shot to death by New Orleans police officers during a gun battle that ensued after the truck ramming, or because he used the wrong mechanism to detonate the explosives, Jackson said. He said it appeared Jabbar had intended to detonate the devices with an electronic match or a hobby switch, which are both readily available in the US, as opposed to a more professional detonation device, which is harder to obtain. He didn't use the right or correct device to set it off, and that is just indicative of his inexperience and lack of understanding how that material might be set off, Jackson said. Which may be true, right? But it also could be true that it was one of those detonators that required manual detonation or flipping of a switch per se, which he was not capable of doing after getting into a gun battle with police. So there's definitely the capability that all of this we're being told right now about the IEDs themselves is true. But I just wanted to mention that there are some inconsistencies and some contradictions that have me question some of the FBI's integrity when it comes to this stuff, right? So Jackson said investigators believe Jabbar built the IEDs at his home in Houston, where a search turned up bomb-making materials, including RDX explosive material. He said FBI laboratory technicians are comparing the explosive material found in Jabbar's Houston residence to what was found in the IEDs. The FBI lab will conduct additional tests on the material, which we believe will turn out to be commonly found explosives right here in the United States, Jackson said. Mirthill said investigators are still probing Jabbar's recent travel as they attempt to determine how he became radicalized. In videos Jabbar recorded while driving to New Orleans from Texas, he is heard allegedly proclaiming his support for ISIS and mentioning he joined the terrorist group before this summer, according to the FBI. Now, here's where it gets interesting and why I feel there may be more to this story. Because we have some information that doesn't quite line up, but we also have a large loss of American lives where, well, when that happens, people need to be held accountable if this could have been prevented. And so these are things that I want you to keep in mind as we move forward here. We have not seen any indications of an accomplice in the U.S., but we are still looking into potential associates in the U.S. and outside our borders. Okay? So, interestingly enough, this gentleman took a trip to Egypt in 2023. All right? Now, let's look into that. Oh, and by the way, in the gunfight, he used a 9mm semi-automatic pistol and a .308 caliber semi-automatic rifle with a privately made silencer, apparently. Keep that in mind, too. First off, the privately made silencer part is interesting to me, especially based on what happened with Luigi here, just recently. So that's probably just being put out there for a reason. And the fact that a .308 rifle was being used, that is not something that's easy to deal with, even if you have a concealed carry on you, right? Like, keep that in mind. I believe the number is it took 21 rounds of 9mm from a trained police officer to subdue the attacker in Fargo, North Dakota back in July of 2023. And that person had an AR-15 and body armor on, okay? So just keep that in mind as somebody who's a civilian who doesn't have backup and is likely not wearing armor of any kind. If you go up against an opponent with a rifle and you have a pistol, I mean, you may have to based on circumstance, but in all reality, that's a very bad ratio of winning to losing, right? So let's talk about guys' trip to Egypt. So somehow, keep this in mind, this person got radicalized. They decided to support ISIS. They committed an attack that was, well, something ISIS suggests people do, using a vehicle to basically increase the amount of damage that they can cause. And the FBI is not really sure, where they would have gotten radicalized or if they have any outside help or any accomplices. But we do know that they took a trip to Egypt for a month. That's not just your typical vacation now, is it? And it was also reported for quite some time that this person had financial struggles and was having issues with their marriage and all types of other things. And the other thing to keep in mind is that people are saying that they had this very, high-paying job, which was interesting because then I also saw numbers saying that they were earning like $10,000 a month. Now, $120,000 a year is a comfortable job. But I don't necessarily put it in the category of like extremely high pay. Like, you're not rich on $120,000 a year. You're probably doing okay, but do you have alimony? Do you have child support? Do you have, excessive debt because you're in this job where you're expected to have this level of, decorum about you and this presentation that makes you seem like you're a big shot? Like, I don't know. But all I'm saying is $120,000 a year is good pay, but it's not rich. And it's definitely not, I can go hang out in Egypt for a month and have a good time and also not work for a month back home, right? Like, so that's an interesting tidbit that they put out there as if that would have explained some of these things, right? So the suspect in the truck attack that killed 14 and injured dozens in New Orleans on New Year's had traveled to Egypt in 2023 for about a month. His half-brother told ABC News. Shamsa Din Jabbar, a 42-year-old Army veteran and U.S.-born citizen from Texas, went to Egypt alone and told his family he was going because it was cheap and beautiful, his half-brother, 24-year-old Abdur Jabbar, said. So that's also another data point that's worth keeping in mind. This person went there alone, right? There's a lot of opportunities to get into some stuff when you're by yourself as opposed to traveling with your family or friends or anyone else, right? So this is an interesting concept in the sense of like planning a vacation. I'm going to another country alone for a month, right? So just throwing that out there. I'm not saying people don't do that, but based on circumstance, in hindsight, in context, this person attacked Americans here while supporting ISIS and also happened to spend a month in Egypt just a little while ago, right? So Shamsa Din Jabbar's foreign travel is part of the ongoing investigation, law enforcement officials told ABC News. Investigators are working to determine what he did during his travel in Egypt, why he went, and who he interacted with while there, multiple sources said. Critical to the probe is whether he had been radicalized prior to the travel or if the travel marked the start of his radicalization. This next most important phase of the investigation is to find out how the radicalization happened and if it happened on that trip. Now, I understand what they're saying here. If it happened before, then the trip was probably with intent to meet up with certain individuals and probably go over logistics or who knows what else about what their role would be in the organization. But if it happened on the trip, then there's also the possibility that people, especially Americans, are being targeted for radicalization when they're out of country because it's much easier to do it in other places where you're not going to stick out in the sense of being some sort of, terrorist cell. But at the same time, then you're sending them back with new orders and a new set of ideals that they didn't have before, right? So there are differences here, which is why I understand that that's important in order to, figure out. Early on New Year's Day, well, we know what happened in the attack, okay? So now let's go down here, and we want to double check his situation here. And this is something that I find important too. The officials noted that 2 days after the attack, there has been no claim of responsibility by ISIS. And yes, that's true. ISIS has still not claimed responsibility. Usually they might have claimed things. But to be fair, and this is just based on sort of relevant information at this point in time, right? We all know about the Sean Ryan podcast, especially regarding the Las Vegas incident, but we also know about his recent guest, Sarah Adams, talking about attacks in 2025 and terrorist cells and everything else. But one of the things she said during that interview was the fact that that I found more interesting than probably some of the other parts of the interviews, because there's stuff in those interviews that makes me feel like, okay, well, we are talking about a bunch of ex-CIA types here, which means who knows, right? But what I will say is one thing she said and mentioned was that these groups no longer concern themselves with taking credit or with even, being part of certain attacks. All they care about is that there's chaos. All they care about is that the attacks occur. They no longer care about the credit because any attack that happens is still furthering their agenda, right? So keep that in mind because that might be what we're seeing here as well, okay? Let's see here. Mike H. with the $5 super chat. Nice deadpan. Go it alone, Magic. Yeah, exactly. But Mike, always appreciated. Thank you so much for always popping in here and supporting what I do. Okay, so, however, investigators are still working through his 3 phones and 2 laptops and examining his travel history. I'm sorry. Look, I know he was a realtor, so there's a possibility that this person needed multiple phones for whatever it was they were doing, a business line and a personal line or whatever it might be, right? But 3 phones and 2 laptops is, slightly excessive. I own 2 laptops, right? But it's because I have a new one that works well and an old one I don't use, right? It's not unrealistic for somebody to have those things, but all I'm saying is that they're very certain this person worked alone, and they're very certain that there's no accomplices and stuff, considering that he has all the trademarks of someone who's working with one of these organizations, right? But I'm just saying, we're being told these things very quickly, and then new stuff comes out, and then the story slightly changes, which is why I think this story really is the most important one, and why I think that Las Vegas situation may be sort of a distraction from what happened here, okay? Another update Friday, authorities revealed Jabbar set a small fire in the hallway of the property in New Orleans he rented on Mandeville Street before the attack. And yes, this person burnt down their Airbnb that they were staying in New Orleans during that time, okay? So this person had a lot of equipment based on the exact things they needed for the attack. They had at least some idea of how to put together IEDs, including remotes that could remotely detonate them. They also had, these additional forms of communication. They had the ability or the thought process to burn down their rental home and all this other stuff. To me, this is the trademark of somebody who wasn't just working alone. There seems to be some level of organization here. Now, that whole situation is more interesting because there were warnings about the exact type of attack before it happened. Okay? Good evening, South Florida, aka Doug. Good to see you. Glad you're here. Now, Rip Curl Readiness, thanks for being here. Thank you for modding. I always appreciate it. Let's talk about, John Decker says, there's no way they track down every angle. I agree, and that's the thing. It's very interesting to me for them to come out saying these definitive things and then immediately having to come back and say, well, but he did go to Egypt, but we don't know if that actually had anything to do with anything. I mean, it's definitely a data point that you wouldn't find in my background, right? Like, so if I get arrested for some weird charge tomorrow, they're not going to be able to be like, well, this guy obviously went somewhere and learned a lot of weird stuff at some kind of a training camp, right? Like, no. That's not a typical thing that everybody has. And then when the guy who does a terrorist attack has that going on in their background as, oh yeah, and by the way, he went to Egypt for a month by himself, that means more than it does for, like, example, my English teacher in high school went to Egypt by himself for like a week because he was just a weird guy who wanted to explore. And I thought, that's cool. Do your thing, man. But he went there for a week and he also had quite a bit of money. And he was also a weird guy. So, like, but he wasn't doing crime or doing anything bad either. So things matter more in context, but they're going to use that idea as if, like, it doesn't matter, okay? So let's go ahead and talk about how they knew this was going to happen. Now, I don't know if they knew this exact attack was going to happen, but I can almost guarantee you that the FBI probably had this guy on their radar, right? Because, like, when haven't they had that? Every time these things happen, we were aware of this person, but they didn't do anything for us to actually take action until it was too late. That happens like every single time. That even happens with a lot of these people who, tried to assassinate President-elect Trump, right? Like, all these things keep happening, and it seems like they're always aware of the person before him. But they were aware of the idea of these attacks happening before the attack happened, which should tell you some things as well. Authorities warned of vehicle ramming attack danger in U.S. during holiday season. This is from January 1st, okay? So this is from the day that this all happened. This is being reported. Okay. In the weeks leading up to the holidays, federal law enforcement and intelligence agencies warned police around the country that low-tech vehicle ramming was a key area of concern and they needed to prepare. On December 6th, the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and National Counterterrorism Center issued a joint intel bulletin warning law enforcement about the ongoing serious threat posed by lone offenders during the winter holiday season. The bulletin noted that threat actors have plotted and conducted attacks against holiday targets in previous years, with likely targets including public places with perceived lower levels of security, holding large gatherings or holiday events, and advised governments and law enforcement to remain vigilant of these threats. Lone offenders have historically used simple tactics, such as edged weapons, firearms, or vehicle ramming, due to their ease of access, ability to inflict mass casualties, and lack of required training. It cited a November 2021 vehicle ramming attack that killed 6 people during a Christmas parade in Waukesha, Wisconsin, among recent incidents during the winter holiday. In a December 9th assessment for the Times Square New Year's Eve celebration, federal and local agencies wrote that they remain concerned about the use of vehicle ramming against high-profile outdoor events. Vehicle ramming has become a recurring tactic employed by threat actors in the West, marked by a continued interest by terrorists, extremists, and lone offenders in targeting crowded pedestrian areas. In a December 27th New Year's Eve advisory issued in advance of the annual Las Vegas celebrations, officials noted intentional mass casualty incidents involving motor vehicles as weapons represent a growing trend in Western countries. This method has resulted in the highest casualty rates per incident within the fields of intentional mass casualty incidents. Okay? See? Now, yes, of course, there's plenty of evidence for this happening and plenty of reason for why they would be putting out these warnings. But what this tells you is that they know that this was a real issue. They knew it was definitely a possibility. And it's very interesting that they're talking about mass casualty incidents from the framing of extremist lone attackers that were radicalized by terrorist groups. being the biggest threat that they're concerned about when it comes to large public gatherings during the holiday season. And when one actually happens, they don't call it a terrorist attack, even though they were literally flying an ISIS flag off the back of the truck. So, here's something I want to talk about real quick. If they cyber attack the IRS, would anyone care? Well, probably, because they have all of our information, Florida Sheepdog, so that means they would get all of our data as well, and that could be a problem. Now, not that they don't already have it, let's be honest. AZ Desert Rat, you missed some things, especially related to the New Orleans attack, so I would say you probably need to go back and watch that maybe during the replay, but I'm glad you're here and you should stick around because there's more we need to talk about, so thank you for being here. Now, here's the thing. In my most recent video, I talked about a heightened risk environment and how we're currently in one right now and how we should approach things from that viewpoint, because as a preparedness-related person, right? Somebody who wants to be prepared for whatever could happen, especially regarding attacks here on U.S. soil, which we know are becoming more and more prevalent. The whole idea of that video was the fact that we're in that period of time right now. That period of time might not last very long. It might not last forever. It could last a long time. I just don't know. But right now, this is what's happening. And right now, we're being told that this is the environment we're in by law enforcement agencies. And people are ignoring that. In fact, even in that video, some people are claiming that I was just trying to tell everyone they need to live in fear and to, hide or whatever and let the terrorists win because that's their goal, right? No. What I'm trying to tell you is that you need to make smart decisions where you can, when you can, and don't take unnecessary risks just because. I don't just walk down dark alleyways and shady neighborhoods because I don't live in fear, right? No, I don't do that because it's an unnecessary risk that has no benefit or reward in the immediacy, especially knowing that that is a heightened risk environment, dark, shady alleyway in the middle of the night. So the same applies right now to mass gatherings and large public events. But people are always going to misconstrue those types of things because they think that there's some, nefarious purpose behind what I do here. But in reality, I'm just trying to give you good information so you can make better choices or decisions based on circumstance. And right now, we're being told by the law enforcement agencies that these things could be happening more frequently now because they're concerned about copycat or retaliatory style attacks that would go along the same exact lines as what we saw in New Orleans. The Federal Bureau of Investigation and other federal agencies have warned about the risk of copycat or retaliatory attacks after a man drove a rented pickup truck through a crowd of New Year's revelers on New Orleans Bourbon Street. The bulletin, reviewed by CBS News, was released overnight and distributed to law enforcement partners nationwide. It warned that vehicle ramming attacks are likely to remain attractive for aspiring attackers because of the relative ease of acquiring a vehicle, but maybe they do mean requiring a vehicle and the low skill threshold necessary to carry out such a plot. The tactic has often been used by ISIS in the past. According to the bulletin, neither ISIS nor any other terror group has claimed responsibility for the Bourbon Street attack, the bulletin said. But the driver, identified as Shamsuddin Jabbar, a 42-year-old U.S. Army veteran from Houston, declared his support for ISIS in a series of videos posted before the attack. If this person was posting ISIS-related videos on social media prior to the attack, and they had the travel itinerary that they had, right, which going to Egypt for a month by yourself and coming back and then posting videos about supporting ISIS usually puts you on some kind of radar, right? I mean, listen, I'm on a radar just for doing what I do on YouTube. This guy was probably on somebody's radar, which is why I assume there's some level of covering your own ass occurring here when it comes to the FBI. But moving forward, because I don't have proof of that, this is just what we're going to talk about. The federal bulletin noted that official ISIS messaging between 2014 and 2016 called for ramming attacks followed with secondary weapons. At least 13 attacks using vehicles as weapons were carried out in the United States, Canada, and Europe between 2016 and 2017, the agency said. The Bourbon Street attack is the 7th attack inspired by a foreign terror organization on U.S. soil since 2001, the bulletin said, and the first since 2017 to result in fatalities. Now, think about that. It's been, 7 to 8 years since there has been a terror-related attack here on U.S. soil that actually resulted in fatalities. Yeah, this is a heightened risk environment, right? This is a lot of incompetency from up top. The current administration, the current Department of Justice, the people who are in charge of our bureaus, not necessarily field agents, right? Not necessarily police who are on the ground trying to just protect people where they can, but the people who are running these agencies are not taking this stuff seriously, and it's definitely a problem. So keep that in mind, but that's how things are going. Now, the surge in vehicle ramming attacks in 2016 and 2017 suggests that successful attacks, particularly in the West, may inspire similarly motivated actors to adopt the same method. Okay, so this is telling you right now that this is a heightened risk environment, that this is what you could expect moving forward, and that at least the FBI and Departments of Homeland Security, as well as other intelligence agencies, expect more of these types of attacks to occur based on copycat and retaliatory attacks, okay? It's just the environment we're currently in. I hope that things get better here in the near future. But unfortunately, in order for them to improve, I think they have to get worse first. And if they're going to get worse first, that means you need to change your habits and you need to change your strategy when it comes to what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do regarding risk. And right now, with that risk level higher, you need to set a threshold of how important is this for me to do? How high is the risk? What's the likelihood of something bad happening here, or at least it being a considered target? And does what I'm trying to accomplish actually meet the threshold of necessitating taking that risk? And that's what I would definitely start thinking about right now. I hope it improves. Maybe by this summer, we could actually be on the other side of this and being like, you know what? I'm taking a vacation and I'm going to an amusement park and I don't care. And that might be okay. But I don't know that right now. And all I know is right now, it's probably not the best idea to go out and just be somewhere that you know could be dangerous if you don't need to be. That's just what I'm saying. Okay, now, South Florida, a.k.a. Doug, says, once Trump takes office, things will happen very quickly. What are your thoughts on something happening? What I think is that they will have a new strategy for trying to deal with some of these threats, and that strategy is probably going to be heavy-handed, and that heavy-handed strategy is probably going to create events of their own through the process that are almost necessary to get to the other side of this being more resolved. Not resolved per se, but at least minimized, right? And that's something I'm concerned about, to be honest with you. Once you drop the hammer, you're going to miss a few nails, and those nails are going to bite, right? They're going to poke you, which that sounds weird. Now, let's talk about Las Vegas, because some weird stuff happened there as well. And this story, as well as another story that could have been a potential attack on U.S. soil, were talked about in a certain way for a certain amount of time. And then things changed very quickly. So this story in particular has a lot of reasons for people to be skeptical about, especially because of how quickly the 360 seemed, or I guess it's a 180. I don't know math. A 180 occurred so quickly that it also makes me wonder if things were implicated or let's just say somebody got a hold of somebody. I'm not sure. But we all know that we had this really crazy podcast scenario on Sean Ryan's show, right? And on this show, an email was released from the attacker in Las Vegas. We're calling him an attacker because regardless of what the intended purpose of that event was or anything else, that person set off an explosive device that injured people and created property damage. That's an attack. Doesn't matter if it wasn't meant to do what it did. That's what happened, okay? But regardless, in this email, we don't have to rehash it. I'm not Sean Ryan. I'm not of that caliber when it comes to, everything related to that. But what I can say is that there's things in this email that are very interesting and very questionable that should have everyone questioning the validity of such things, such as the fact that this person's talking about gravitic propulsion systems and how there's basically UFO-style UAPs that China and the U.S. have control of that have unlimited payloads and can be anywhere in the flash of an eye and drop a bomb like anywhere in the country at any point that they want. All kinds of crazy stuff. And this person's trying to talk about how they were trying to stop World War III by getting out their message and how there's war crimes and things of that nature. Now, the FBI has come out and said that they do believe this email was sent by that individual, but that doesn't mean everything in the email is true. It just means that it was sent by that person. So at first glance and first hearing about this and reading the email, you get a little bit excited in a way of like, almost like panic because it's like, what is happening? This is insane, right? It sounds like something out of a movie. It sounds too good to be true in the sense of like some of the revelations inside regarding this UAP technology and everything else. But then because of that feeling of excitement or that feeling of uncertainty, you should be questioning it and saying, hold on a second, I need to figure out what's really happening here. I can't tell you for a fact what occurred here, but I can tell you there's a lot of strange things that happened, including stuff regarding being told by law enforcement investigators that the person was found with a gunshot wound to the head that most likely occurred prior to the explosion, and then video evidence has recently come out maybe showing us otherwise. So there's a lot of questions here, which is why this is gaining so much attention. But like I said, I do believe that there's likely some level of distraction going on here because the real thing that's the real issue is what happened in New Orleans. A guy with an ISIS flag on his truck ran down innocent American lives and then jumped out with a rifle and had a police shootout and meant to blow up IEDs as well in the process. That's a way bigger deal, especially from a personal preparedness standpoint, than this particular thing. This particular thing is like kind of like a digital version of a honeypot. It has everything that anybody who's skeptical of the government or skeptical of everything in the sense of like conspiracy, it has everything that someone wants to latch onto regarding that, and it will suck all of your attention right into it because there's just so much going on and so many rabbit holes to go down that it almost feels designed to be that way, right? Now here's the thing. All that came out. And Sean Ryan generally has been a pretty credible source in the sense of his background, the guests he has on, the intention behind the show, and everything else. So there's reason for people to say, okay, hold on. And he has come out in the past and apologized for things that weren't necessarily true once there was more information, right? So if there is any of that happening in the future, I would expect him to come out and do corrections or at least issue some sort of statement. But regardless, now we're being told this. So this changed very fast. And I just want everyone to kind of think about that as we move forward with these events, that you have to take a step back, take a pause, and be patient before developing a strong opinion about anything in the immediacy of it occurring. Because in all honesty, it's one of the reasons why I like these once-a-week live streams. It gives me time to digest information. It gives the information itself time to disseminate and be investigated. And then I have more to work with when we come back here to talk about it. So keep that in mind, okay? Army Green Beret behind Las Vegas Cybertruck attack wrote New Year's Eve letter signaling mental health crisis. The string of coincidences that initially appeared to link the New Year's Day tragedies in New Orleans and Las Vegas have been overtaken by mounting evidence that the Tesla Cybertruck bombing at the Trump International Hotel was in fact a public display of a private tragedy, new information and interviews show. Is this the truth? I can't tell you. And this would be an excellent way to cover up what could be the truth if that's what you wanted to do. So this is why you just have to keep digesting this information as it comes along and just hope that we get some level of truth out of it at some point in time. This may be the more reasonable explanation for what occurred there, but we just don't know. And in case you aren't aware, those similarities that they're talking about between the two attacks were interesting, right? They're both U.S. Army veterans. One of them was active duty. The one here in the Las Vegas attack was active duty at the time. They served during the same period of time. They both were at Fort Bragg at some point in time, which I know doesn't have a lot of relevancy because of how many people go through there, but it was just something that was another indicator. They both used the same app to rent the vehicles that they did their attack with. There was a lot of weird stuff. So I get the correlations that people are pointing out because there was a lot of correlations. But now this is what we're being told, which is, like I said, could be completely false too. But it's just what you have to take in as another set of data points in order to develop a more well-rounded and more well-informed opinion about what's going on here. Decorated U.S. Army Special Forces Master Sergeant Matthew Livelsberger sent a disjointed email on the morning of New Year's Eve to Samuel Shoemate, a retired Army intelligence officer and military pundit. It outlined a constellation of grievances and dire warnings related to his military service, but gave no hint of or explanation for his actions. Okay? In a text made public by local authorities, Livelsberger wrote, "I needed to cleanse my mind of the brothers I've lost lost and relieve myself of the burden of the lives I took. And in an interview Friday, a former girlfriend of Livelsberger's said he told her that he suffered a traumatic brain injury while serving in the Middle East. Alicia Arrett, who is in a relationship off and on with Livelsberger from 2018 to 2021, told CBS News that she exchanged around 30 texts with Livelsberger in the days leading up to the bombing. She said he gave no indication that he was planning to take his own life or blow up a Tesla Cybertruck outside the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. He loved the Army and he gave his life and his mind for it, Arrett said. An Army spokesperson confirmed to CBS News in a statement Saturday that Livelsberger had received counseling through its Preservation of the Force and Family program. Master Sergeant Matthew Livelsberger had access to and used the POTFF program. He did not display any concerning behaviors at the time and was granted personal leave. All relevant records were provided to the FBI as the lead investigative agency, the spokesperson said. Now, hold on. They're now trying to throw this story into the realm of a mental health crisis. But there are still some weird things here that definitely need to be considered, because we had passports and IDs that survived the same fire that made this person's body unidentifiable. We had DNA evidence used to identify this person rather than the typical stuff like dental and stuff like that. And then we also were told that, that DNA evidence also proved that his child wasn't his. It's like there's so many questionable things here that just don't add up. Even the weapons that this person had on them, including a Desert Eagle. The tradecraft involved with making the IED was questionable to many as well. Personally, I don't have any experience with that, so I'm not going to put any of my opinion out there, but I do know that some people were wondering about the choices made to that degree as to what was exactly happening there. I don't know. All I know is that now we're talking about that we have this mental health crisis instead of somebody who was actually, according to them, being followed and had an important message to get out to the public that was stifled, apparently. So we are in a weird spot here, and this is something that I find to be very strange. But the biggest thing I want to tell you about this is that the story has changed. It changed very quickly, and suddenly it's mental health. And it wasn't that before. And even this person, what's his name? Samuel Shoemate, okay, went on another podcast or a live of some kind where they were interviewing with someone else where they started saying things like, well, actually, this person was just crazy. But like just the day before, they were saying things along the lines of he was mentally stable and always seemed to be in good spirits and everything else. So I don't know who to believe. And I also don't know if somebody got a hold of someone, right? And it's very possible that we have people who are, compromised because of their status from previous service. And when I say that, what I mean is, that person is an intelligence officer. Sean Ryan is an ex-intelligence officer, right? Like a lot of these people have worked in agencies where I'm sure there are ways these agencies have leverage against them, right? So keep that in mind. Now, and I think the biggest takeaway here is patience when it comes to information, but also don't get distracted from what's actually the threat here. That attack didn't really, it hurt, I think 7 people or so got hurt in it, mostly from like debris and things of that nature. But at the same time, the attack that actually, killed Americans and was intentionally done through radicalization of a terrorist organization, that's the one that really matters for your personal preparedness and for what we should expect more of. This one is a whole different thing that also feels like the biggest distraction trap that I've ever seen. So I don't know what to say, but I just needed to give you that information and to update you on the fact that currently as it stands, it was a mental health crisis. A day ago, it was something completely different, right? So just pay attention, but don't get too invested in anything until we have more verification. Now, there was another attempted attack What genius decided a Desert Eagle would be the right prop? Says Water the Tree 76. I don't know. Did anyone watch The Terminal List? The show on Amazon with Chris Pratt, and it's off the books series by Jack Carr. So it's actually a pretty good show considering the quality of shows we get these days, right? But for a show that was made by Amazon, it was actually a pretty good show. One of the interesting things in that show was that the reason he knew that his teammate didn't take his own life was because he used a Sig Sauer P226 9mm, which is the pistol of the Navy SEALs, or at least used to be. And he knew his friend preferred Kimber 1911s and 45 ACP. And that if he was going to take his own life, that's the gun he would have chosen. So maybe that stuff does matter, right? Like maybe that matters. Like in that show, that was the evidence that made him realize that he did not, in fact, take his own life. And for someone with the military experience and background that this person had, to use a Desert Eagle or even to have one in general seemed odd, right? So, Cherokee survival. Good to see you. Glad you're here. Now, let's talk about this Idaho situation. You might not have heard about this because it happened right after January 1st. And of course, we had New Orleans, which was a really big deal. And then we also had Las Vegas, which was insanity. But then this happened. Idaho man arrested for allegedly planting explosive device on railroad car. So things are still happening. But this is actually, at least according to what we now know, a really good example of why you need to be a little patient with this information. Because at first glance, and when this first came out, it sounded like somebody was trying to blow up a train in Idaho. And look, they got caught. And you know what? I'm glad they got caught regardless of intent, because this is what we need to avoid. And obviously, taking out infrastructure is bad for everybody in the country. It doesn't matter where you live. But this is even more interesting than you might think, because kind of related to the Matthew Livelsberger situation, the mental health crisis, you're going to see that there might be some things to consider here as well. Okay, so Payette, Idaho. A Payette man was arrested Wednesday after allegedly planting an explosive device on a railroad car. According to the Payette Police Department, officers responded to North 8th Street around 6 p.m. on New Year's Day after receiving a report of a suspicious man attempting to light something on fire near a parked railroad car. The suspect was later identified as 40-year-old Brent Shirai. Police tracked footprints in the snow from the scene and discovered an improvised explosive device near the railroad car. Officers continued following the footprints to a trailer in the 600 block of North 8th Street. IEDs are on the menu, apparently. Everything we're talking about tonight has IEDs involved. So you should be expecting IEDs. And now, one thing to keep in mind regarding IEDs is that, they're explosive devices, and a big part of their intent is to not just explode, but to create shrapnel, right? If they can have some level of fragmentation, that's going to do the most damage. So sometimes people load, like we saw with, I believe it's the Boston Marathon bombing, where they use pressure cookers that were loaded up with like ball bearings and things like that. Like, you don't just need an explosion, you need something to explode and spread out to inflict maximum damage. And so something you might want to consider regarding how every one of these things we're talking about involved explosive devices of some kind. Some level of fragmentation or just like flak protection might be a good idea, especially if you're going to be somewhere that's a little bit more risky. So, and that means all you need is like level 3A, right? You don't need rifle plates or anything like that. But if you got like just a basic bulletproof vest that stops pistol rounds, those are often meant for fragmentation, not just bullets, right? So those are just things you can keep in mind. But regardless, okay? When officers approached, Shirai reportedly tried to flee on foot, but surrendered after a short pursuit. He was taken into custody on outstanding Payette County warrants. He was later booked in the Payette County Jail on additional charges, including possession of a destructive device, possession of a controlled substance, possession of paraphernalia, and resisting and obstructing officers. Due to the danger posed by the IED, a bomb squad was called to the scene. Union Pacific was notified, and all trains scheduled to pass through the area were put on standby for approximately 5 hours until the scene was declared safe. An FBI agent also responded to assist with the investigation. They're always around, aren't they? They always just seem to show up right at the right time. But in this situation, like I said, I think we might be seeing a wait and see type scenario, because here's what happened then directly after. Suspect arrested for explosive device on train skips arraignment. Parents decry overreaction. Why would they decry an overreaction? Well, because this person, apparently, according to the parents, has like the mind of a child, is not mentally stable and has mental challenges that makes them so they're not really an adult making adult decisions. The parents of the man accused of trying to set off a pipe bomb in a Payette train car were audibly frustrated. Shirai has been in custody since his New Year's Day arrest after someone called Payette police to report a suspicious person attempting to light something on fire around some train cars. They didn't locate anybody immediately, but they were, because of the fresh snow, able to find footprints leading to the train car that was parked near the location. Okay? According to the affidavit, Shirai told officers he made his own firework for a New Year's celebration to get a bigger boom. After falling asleep before midnight, he chose to light his firework the next night. Nampa police, whose bomb squad helped detonate the explosive, said the pipe was about 8 inches long and 3/4 of an inch wide. Kiwi spoke with Shirai's family outside the courthouse, who offered some insight into what they say he was using to make his homemade explosive. "You can get them at any fireworks stand," said Shirai's ex-girlfriend. Shirai's parents said he has multiple behavioral diagnoses and described him as a child in an adult's body. They also worry recent events in New Orleans and Las Vegas are blowing Brent's case out of proportion. Payette Police Chief Marshal and his department feels this case is in no way connected to terrorism and was an isolated incident. So this guy basically stuffed a bunch of fireworks into a pipe of some kind. We didn't get told if it was PVC or metal or whatever it was, and maybe was just trying to make a big firework. I don't know. So also, what we learned from that story is that IED is being applied to anything explosive. Pipe bombs aren't always considered IEDs, but they are technically IEDs, but we're not reported on pipe bombs as being IEDs all the time, are we? A lot of times, even during, the last January 6th, we're still getting information about pipe bombs regarding that event. But they're not being called IEDs, they're being called pipe bombs. But in this story, it was called an IED, even though it was a pipe bomb. So there is something to consider when it comes to this information that comes out as quickly as it does. And there's also something to consider about why it's being written in such a way or why it's being perceived in such a way, right? So all I want you to know from that is that, yes, it's possible this person was trying to attack trains, but yes, it's also possible they are someone who has a mental challenge that was just trying to make a very big firework. And because of this heightened threat environment, that could happen more easily in the sense of law enforcement involvement, taking it very seriously. And I think that you should consider that too as a prepared citizen. If you are doing anything shady or sketchy, or you're thinking you're going to do something fun that could, wake up your neighbors, maybe right now is not the best time, right? Maybe tannerite in a washing machine is not the best idea right now, FPS Russia. So let's talk about the heightened risk environment, which I just keep talking about, but haven't really shown you any reason why that's what we're calling it right now, right? Hello, Gary Macias. Good to see you. Glad you're here. All the way from California. The Simple Prepper. Good to see you too. Glad you're here. Now, Joe Oliveira says they depict the IED pipe bomb by who they want to blame for the act. And I agree with that. Now, let's go ahead and move on to the last story of the night, which is how they're preparing the U.S. Capitol for Inauguration Day. Now, I want you to really keep this in mind. First off, U.S. Capitol in heightened threat environment after New Year's Day attacks. Hey, there's the word we've been looking for, okay? This story's from January 5th. So I didn't take that word from this story in my last video, which clearly came out before January 5th. But, actually it came out on January 5th. But I don't care, okay? Because it came out at 11 a.m. and this came out at 12:10 p.m. So there you go. But what I'm trying to say is that this applies everywhere. This isn't just in the Capitol. But they're treating it like this in the Capitol because of the events that are occurring there. But the heightened threat environment applies to the entire country right now. It's not just the U.S. Capitol. But this is also regarding Inauguration Day, which is the next date we need to pay attention to based on possible activity. I told you guys in a video a month ago that there was 4 days that you needed to be watching out for. And right now we've passed all those days except for January 20th. So we need to be very vigilant because that's the last one on the list of, expected threats to possibly come to fruition. Now, real quick, I want to mention this USCP guy, U.S. Capitol Police. I don't know is that like their standard uniform? Is that how they're dressing these days? Is this guy a scav from Tarkov or something? Because I don't understand what's happening here per se, but I guess this is the new U.S. Capitol Police loadout. So be aware of that. They look like they might rob you at a convenience store while also being the police who show up to save you at the same time. Now, law enforcement and security agencies in and around Washington are bringing in reinforcements as they prepare to secure 3 high-profile events in the nation's capital following the New Year's Day terror attack in New Orleans and the Cybertruck bombing in front of the Trump International Hotel in Las Vegas. The first event will occur Monday, that's today. The second event will be the state funeral for the late President Jimmy Carter, starting with a ceremony and procession on Tuesday before wrapping up on Thursday. The last high-profile event will come January 20th, when President-elect Donald Trump is inaugurated. Now, I'm watching out for January 20th, maybe not so much for Jimmy Carter's birthday. Funeral, sorry, not trying to be disrespectful there, but I think January 20th is the one that has the higher propensity to have something happen. So that's what I'm actually watching out for, but I'm not denying the fact that anything could happen at any point, right? That has never happened before. We have 3 national security events over a 15-day period. Matt McCool, U.S. Secret Service Washington Field Office Special Agent in Charge, told reporters Friday. This is the same Secret Service that couldn't get on a sloped roof because, dangerous. This is the same Secret Service that shot 6 times at a guy from 5 feet away and didn't hit him once. I'm not super confident in that, but this is what they're saying, so just be aware. But what I will tell you is that we're flexible. We're adaptable. We've been working on these events for, in some cases, years, he said, so we're going to be prepared. Have you practiced getting on a roof? Despite concerns stemming from the New Orleans attack and the Las Vegas bombing, security officials are confident so far that the Washington events will proceed safely. We are not tracking any credible or specific threats associated with these events, said David Sundberg, assistant director in charge at the FBI's Washington field office. They always say that right before an event happens, don't they? The law enforcement and security agencies, however, are not taking any chances, acknowledging that the city and the region are operating in a heightened threat environment. The Secret Service said Friday that it was bringing in agents from across the country to boost staffing levels, which are already the highest they have been in 3 years. Washington's Metropolitan Police Department said it has added to its ranks almost 4,000 officers from departments across the country. The Capitol's National Guard Bureau confirmed it also has approved requests for additional support, including the provision of 500 guardsmen for the J6 election certification and liaison officers for the state funeral. An additional request for 7,800 National Guard soldiers and airmen to assist with security for the Trump inauguration is pending. That's a lot of security. They are expecting it to need a lot of security. Increased security measures, including barriers and fencing, are already up in parts of Washington and around the Capitol, but more are coming. A multitude of seen and unseen security measures will operate in tandem to ensure a comprehensive and seamless security plan comes to fruition, McCool said, adding that the measures will include the use of aerial drones. The Secret Service will use drones as part of our comprehensive security plan, McCool said. Do not be alarmed if you see these assets during the upcoming events or training in the days ahead. Did they learn that from Matthew Thomas Crooks? Because he used a drone at the Butler, Pennsylvania event and had a good success in using it as a surveillance tool and trying to find out where he could get on a roof and where he would have good line of sight. And it actually worked really well. And no one noticed that drone being an issue, I guess, but he also didn't have anyone with a drone looking at him on a roof ready to do a bad thing. So maybe they learned a little bit since then, or maybe they're just now finally doing things to the level they're supposed to. I don't know, but I am skeptical at their capabilities based on all the failures we witnessed over the last year. Okay, so the big takeaway here is that they are arming up, they are barricading and fortifying Washington, D.C. for January 20th, which means they're concerned. And they have a right to be concerned because the threat level is high, the threat environment is high. So you should be approaching everything from that same thought process and concept. Are you looking at your daily life or even your extracurricular activities through the lens of this heightened risk environment? Because that's what we're in. And if Washington is locking down and concerned about it right now, what makes you think that you're just magically safe just because you're somewhere else, right? So do yourself a favor. Be aware, have redundancies, have plans, and get some ideas about things that might help you be better prepared regarding, skills, training, gear, anything else that might, give you a leg up. Because right now, that's our biggest threat. The biggest threat right now are these, homegrown terror attacks and these ISIS-inspired radicalizations, not just ISIS, but organizations in general, and political discourse and political extremism. So that's it right this second. Could that change at any moment? Sure. Is stuff happening between Russia and Ukraine? Sure. Ukraine launched another offensive in the Kursk region just today. I'm sure that's going to make things better or probably not change anything, right? So that's where we're at. Do we also have different situations going on with China? Yes, we do. Do we have, additional escalations between them and Taiwan? Of course. So those things are important too, and obviously we're going to take a look at that. But I do think that right now, we know there's a new administration coming in, which means there's a good chance that that geopolitical situation might just take a different trajectory. I don't know if it's going to improve or get worse, but what I do know is that it's likely to change course. So what that means is that we're in a weird pivot zone right now. So the best thing to concern ourselves with is what's happening here at home right now that we can actually have some level of effect on regarding our own personal safety. And hopefully, if you didn't see my video from yesterday, I found that video to be pretty well thought out in the sense of just some suggestions about things you could do to up your personal security, up your safety, your strategy, and at the same time, give you some gear and concepts you might consider that maybe you haven't thought about before. So I'll put that video in the live chat right now in case anybody missed it, and that way you can take a look at that because there's some strategies in there that aren't typical in the sense of like the civilian world, and then there's also some gear suggestions that I made that aren't just like, this gun or this armor. Those are in there because it's this channel, right? But at the same time, there's some other things in there that are more practical that maybe you haven't thought about. So, listen, you guys are all amazing. I really appreciate you being here. Carson Logan, good to see you. Hey there, Briar Patch. Good to see you. It's me, Paradise Acres. Oh, cool. Well, you weren't talking to me, but I like seeing you too, so I'm glad you're here. Joker747, stay vigilant and continue to strengthen your communities. Got to live life, don't live in constant fear. And I agree with that. And that's not what I'm trying to purvey here or express. I'm not telling you to live in fear, but I am saying that when things are in a heightened risk environment or when threat levels are higher than they usually are, make decisions that are smart about that particular environment. And if you feel safe about what you're doing because you did your due diligence and you did research or at least got some ideas about what level the threat could be at in that location, well, make that decision a little bit more informed with more confidence, and you can feel better about the activity you're going to partake in. But if you're going to just blindly go to a major event right now without any preparation at all and without any type of strategy or gear or anything that might help you get out in case things get bad, well, then it just sounds like you're just trying to ignore the fact that bad things have been happening lately and that there is a reason to believe that more of them will occur, right? So just trying my best to give you guys some things to consider. Don't live in fear. I still do stuff. Don't get me wrong. I'm still going to go out and do the things I got to do, but I'm not going to go to a major league sports game tomorrow. Like I'm just not going to do that right now. But that's my choice. If you want to do that, then you just should prepare accordingly. And that's what's in that video are ways you can prepare for that. If that's something you need to do or have to do, well, at least you have some ideas about what you could do to make your life a little easier in case things go wrong. Okay. So, Kevin Brown, I'm not in danger. I am the danger. That's right. Perfect. So I am going to start the private live stream here very shortly. If you want to join the private live stream, you can hit the join button down below and become a channel member, or you can actually join Subscribestar, which is $5 a month, but you support this channel directly. And I have some new stuff coming in for Subscribestar this year, which I'm actually kind of excited about, but I have to get it all figured out before I can roll it out. So give me some time on that and a little bit of patience. But I put the link in the live chat and it's in the description of the video in case you're interested in that. The private live stream is just a hangout. We usually devolve into gun talk because that's just what happens, but it's basically ask me whatever you want or talk to me about whatever you want, and we hang out, and it's my way of saying thank you. I do not hold pertinent, relevant preparedness information behind a paywall, so I'm not going to be in there talking about things that you need to hear, right? So just be aware of that. It's just my way of saying thank you to the community, especially those who want to say or who want to financially support what I do here directly, right? So you guys have a great night. Great live, Magic Prepper. As always, have a warm, blessed night, everyone. I agree with that. Carson Logan. Gen G, stay well and well armed. I like that. That's a great statement. And B's nuts says, shut up. So I don't know what you're talking about, but I just find it interesting. So anything else you guys need, you know where to reach me, magicprepper.com. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.